Okay then, welcome to this next video presentation for October 2013. My apologies for the webinar this month, and I've actually been on holiday for the past couple of weeks and I haven't really had a chance to do that, so instead we're going to be sending out this video on the topic at hand. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dipper and I'm the Head of Professional Services here at Farm Plus, and today what we're going to be going over is a topic that's obviously very important to new applications as well as to existing contractors as well, and that is the market entry regulations of 2013. Just to give you a little bit of background on this, let me open up the introduction here. Oh, by the way, for those of you who haven't seen these sort of presentations before, I tend to do these presentations in a mind map format. If you do want to get the whole mind map, then feel free to contact us at Farm Plus and we'll forward it on to you. But we just tend to find that this sort of like works a lot better, and it sort of like condenses the information that I'm going to be providing to you in a sort of bite-sized format. I'm going to open up the introduction in actual fact and just quickly go over this one for you. For those of you who are not aware, the new sort of like entry regulations came into force in April 2013. And what we now use is something called a market entry test. Things like the exemptions have been removed, so things like the 100 hours, things like the only thing which hasn't been removed in actual fact is the distance selling, the internet pharmacies. So everything else up to now has been removed. There's no other exemptions apart from the distance selling. Neighbourhoods are now no longer relevant for relocations, and this particular presentation is based on an article on the PSNC website, and I've got the web address here. It's pretty long, so as you can probably see, I'm certainly not going to expect you to remember that. But the easiest way of getting your hands on it, now if you look at this is actually a Google page. If you just write down PSNC briefing 097/13, you'll come up with the first entry, which is this one here, and if you just click on that, it will pull up effectively what this article is about. So that's the easiest way of getting your hands on this particular article. So if you want to know where this source information came from, it is actually from there. But what we've done is a lot of good information in that article. So what we've done is we've condensed it into a sort of bite-sized format for you to read up on and to view. Okay, so that's a very brief introduction as to the market entry regulation. So essentially the exemptions are being removed. It came into force earlier on this year. Oh, and one other thing, so this article that I'm going to be showing you, if we just log on to this again, is actually quite recent. It's September 2013, so this is probably the most up-to-date information that we've got available as well, that I'm summarising for you. Now let's talk about pharmaceutical need assessments and what has changed and why they have changed. Now, in prior days, the pharmaceutical needs assessments were conducted by the PCTs. The only thing is now PCTs don't exist, so the responsibility now is for the local authority and the health and well-being boards to produce the pharmaceutical need assessments. Now, until April 2000, now obviously this involves a lot of work. I mean, I've done these personally myself, and you can be expected to do anything up to actually it's even got it here, anything between 6 to 12 months to complete, and this is not, we're not exaggerating here. It can take anything up to 6 to 12 months to complete. So it's a lot of work that goes into these PNAs, and as a result of this, the existing PNAs that the PCTs have actually conducted in the past are still valid, and they can be used up to April 2015. So if you've got your old PNAs in place, they are probably the ones that they're using at the moment to determine applications. In terms of updating the PNAs, they have to be updated every 4 years. Now obviously, and the reason why it's every 4 years is simply probably because of the fact that they cost a lot to make, and also the length of time and the consultation time to take to manufacture these assessments is a huge amount of work to do. Now, obviously, within those 4 years of having the complete PNA rewrite, there will be updates. You know, there could be changes in demographics, there could be changes in GP surgeries, there can be changes everywhere, really. And obviously, you need to keep it up to date. So what they would tend to do is, if the update is not huge, they will the local authority and the health and wellbeing boards will offer something called supplementary statements, which can be issued in between different types of pharmaceutical need assessments. Now, the contents, I'm not going to go into this in a huge amount of detail because it's probably not going to be very relevant to you. But the whole idea is essentially to identify new pharmaceutical services or what needs to be provided in the area. And what they take into account is several factors: what's needed, what's already provided, what's needed but not provided, what's desirable but not provided, and anything else that can have an impact upon pharmacy services. So it could be things like dispensing, doctor surgeries, anything. Maybe a new build. If you're happening to live in an area where a new airport is being built, for example, that could probably have a serious impact. Another one could have been, for example, if this was happening a year or two ago, would have been the Olympics, for example, in probably the Tower Hamlets, that sort of area, could have had a serious impact upon pharmaceutical needs. So those are the sorts of things that they would tend to look at. Now, in terms of legality, there's no right of appeal. So, for example, if you don't agree with the assessment, effectively it's tough. You don't. There's no right of appeal, but there is the potential of a judicial review. Now, judicial reviews are extremely expensive, and they need to commence no later than 3 months after publication of the pharmaceutical need assessment. So there's very little you can actually do after a needs assessment has actually been published, apart from going down this judicial review route, which needless to say, unless you've got a very good case, it's probably not a good idea, simply because of the sheer amount that you will need to fork out in order to do that. Okay, so that's essentially what pharmaceutical needs assessments is. Now, in terms of applications, let's quickly hop into that. Now, if, for example, you want to open up a new pharmacy, you will need to apply for it. There are various templates that are available, and what would suggest, if you wanted to open up a new pharmacy, then contact NHS England, and they should be able to provide you with templates as to what you need to put into an application. And these templates, so these applications, are then processed by the local area teams that work for NHS England in each of the sort of localities in your area, in the areas, in the local areas, I should say. Now, there are a variety of different requirements in an application. Now, that's the reason why I would suggest you get the template, because that actually helps to guide you as to what information is required. And in order to make a successful application, you're going to need all the information that's required. Alright, and if you use a template rather than anything else, then you should be guided as to what you're going to need. Now, there is, if, for example, you don't provide all the information, then there's a good chance that the area teams will contact you. In fact, they're required to contact you to ask for the remaining information. The only problem is that it will have an impact upon the timelines, and your application will only be valid once all the information has been gathered. Now, there is a possibility that, say for example, the area team wants to ask you for more information, even though it may be a completed application, but they still want to ask you something more, then they've got the right to ask you. They're not obligated to, but they can ask you. And there is a fee, and I'll go into how much that is. But once the fee is paid, and once the application is completed, and once all the questions are answered, it will enter into the public domain. So in other words, anybody will then be able to see what you're applying for. Alright. Now, we've talked very briefly about fees. Now, I'm not going to go into every single fee that's available. Alright, now if you read this document here, it will actually go into, in actual fact, it's not actually in this document, but it's in the legislation in this document that this document refers to. there are various fees that the NHS England can actually apply for this. Now, there is a fee attached to each application, and one of the reasons that there were several reasons why they did this. First of all, it takes a lot of time to assess an application. The second thing is that pardon me, it helps to defer, or not defer, but it helps to prevent speculative applications as well. I mean, if you're forking out, say for example, for routine application £750 a go, you're going to want to make sure that your application is pretty sound. It's not a small amount of money. So, for example, a routine application, it actually varies with the type of application that you put in, but a routine application is a standard fee of about £750. A relocation to within the same pharmaceutical list. So, for example, if you're going from one part of the one part of the area to another, it's about £150 to assess that application. Doesn't mean to say that you'll get it, but it's still a cost. And there are various other fees as well, but those are the two main ones that you probably will experience. And these fees are in this legislation here. So if you want any more information, just Google this, Pharmaceutical Services Fees for Applications Directions 2013, and you'll get an idea of how much you will end up having to pay. Now, there is a second type of application where, for example, the local area or the local authority looks out for other people to apply for a particular pharmacy within the area. So in other words, they've already got in their minds that they want a pharmacy in an area, and they're just asking other people to apply for it, in which case they can waive the fee. So generally, for most circumstances, you'll probably end up paying one of these two, either a £750 for a new application or £150 for an application into the same pharmaceutical list. So it's not so it's quite a reasonable sum. Let's move on now. So the decision making. Now the local area teams will sort of like decide on these sorts of applications. Now they're required to look at a number of different things, and before it was a first past the post type system. Here it's completely changed. What they will do is that if there are other applications, including to the one which you've put in, they will look at those applications at the same time as well. And at the same time, they can then seek representations from interested parties. So, for example, if your application directly affects somebody else, they will ask for representation from them as well. It can also be deferred as well. The decision can be deferred. And one of the reasons why it can be deferred is if there are other applications that are received for a similar service, if there is a relevant appeal. In other words, if, say, for example, one of your competitors have put in an application and is going through an appeal process, they can defer your application as a result of it. And they're actually not obliged to accept the first application. Once you put in an application, they can open up the application for others. And they can defer it for anything up to 6 months. So in other words, your application can be put on hold. So it's quite a substantial process, and there's no guarantee that your application for a pharmacy for the £750 that you put in is going to succeed. In actual fact, that's one of the reasons why, if you're going to put in an application, it needs to be pretty robust to help prevent these sorts of things from occurring. Now, the time scales. For notifiable applications, there's two different types. There's notifiable and there's not notifiable. Okay, notifiable applications generally tend to mean these sorts of things. So, for example, relocations, distance selling pharmacies, and change of ownership. So basically, these are sorts of applications that generally you just need to be notified about. And these need to be done within a 4-month period. Now, those which aren't notifiable, such as, for example, a simple change of ownership, they tend to be done within a 30-day period. So most of the time, in actual fact, I mean, you probably will be likely to get change of ownerships occurring quite frequently. Most of the time, for more complex applications, they'll need to sort of like give you an idea within sort of like a 4-month period. They can extend this deadline for a good reason as well. So it doesn't have to be within 4 months. If, say, for example, they've got a flood of applications coming in and they need a little bit of extra time to assess all of it, that's probably going to be a good reason for a delay. I mean, I'm sure there's other reasons behind it as well, but it just gives you an idea of the sort of like timescales that are involved. Now, exemptions and exceptions. Now, if you remember earlier on, let me open up this branch here. Sorry, here. We mentioned that the exemptions have been removed. This sort of like goes directly to this sort of like area here. Now, for exemptions, there's no longer an out-of-town exemption. There's no longer a one-stop primary medical centre exemption, and there is no longer a 100-hour exemption now as well. And those pharmacies that are opened up for 100 hours under the previous rules can't apply now for a reduction in hours. They have to be open for 100 hours. So if they applied under the exemption rules previous to this, they still need to be open up for the 100 hours. The only difference here is that you cannot open up a 100-hour pharmacy under an exemption rule. There is an exception to this, and that's the distance selling pharmacy. Alright, they are still able to open up pharmacies under the exemption rules. Now, what they are required to provide is information. Only really what they need to do is to provide information that they can provide essential services safely, that they are not providing face-to-face services, that anybody in England must be able to access their service, and their SOPs will be needed and will need to be robust. In other words, they could potentially say no to a distance selling pharmacy if their SOP, for example, isn't robust enough, or if they feel the SOP isn't robust enough. So this is an idea of the exemption. So a huge change here from the previous rules. Okay, now the final bit to this is the representations on applications. Now, once an application is received, all the affected contractors will be notified, and there is actually also a right of appeal against the application as well. So if it is granted, you could possibly appeal for it as well. So as you can see, there's been a huge change to the market entry regulations, and probably for the better, I would have thought. It was a free-for-all before, and it was an abusable system before as well, but now obviously they put fees onto it. They've removed most of the exemptions. A little bit of advice really would be that if you're going to put in an application now, make sure it is very robust. Otherwise you're going to end up wasting your fee. It's not simply just ticking a box now. They're really going to ask for a lot of information to support your application as well. Okay then, so I'm going to call it a day for this. So hopefully you've enjoyed this. If there is anything else that you need, please do ask. Just to let you know that this is the document as well. Have a look through that. It's a very good one to read. The other one would be, if you're really interested in all this stuff, then obviously look at the associated regulations, which I think I've put up here as well, which is the where is it? I've put it here somewhere. Bear with me a minute. Which is basically, it's the fees and applications. I think it's here, isn't it? I think it was here. There you go. Pharmaceutical services, fees for applications, directions as well. Have a read of that because it's quite in depth and detailed. Okay then, so I'm going to call it a day. Thank you very much for listening to this, and I hope you have a good day. Take care now.